Hi, I'm Joel Yarbrough. Welcome to our Ask Me Anything session here on the first day of the Singapore Fintech Festival, coming to you live from Rapyd's office in Singapore. If you are hanging out on the virtual map, you can find the channel here on the Boat Quay section in Singapore. We will also be doing the same sessions tomorrow, same time, starting all morning in Boat Quay again. Sessions are intended to be relaxed and interactive. This is an Ask Me Anything, which means literally my guest René Michau is looking forward to you asking him terrifically embarrassing, possibly questionable questions, generally from a fintech standing point, but it's an anything, so feel free to go where the audience wants to take you. I am pleased to have René here. Yeah, he is a great part of the fintech community here in Singapore and across the region. He plays a very active role in a lot of things. We will dig into those very, very shortly. So René, for our viewers at home and in the office, and mostly at home, please introduce yourself and tell them what you do.
Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us in this session, and Joel, thanks for hosting me. The Rapyd office here is beautiful today. So I'm René Michau, I work for Standard Chartered Bank, and I run our FinTech client advisory team. This team works across our organisation to support the sales team that works with FinTechs. So we have an industry vertical, which sees FinTech clients as customers, and we work to support them in many ways, looking at how the FinTech ecosystem is evolving. My team connects very well for new RMs who haven't worked in FinTech before, and also then internally we work with a lot of teams around different projects, whether that's blockchain collaborations with clients or rolling out AI systems that are supporting client insights and financial crime prevention. So quite a broad remit, and I'm fortunate enough to work with some great people. But as you said, I mean, the most enjoyable part of the job is getting to work with some of the smartest people on the planet working in FinTech, solving, present company included, solving some really interesting problems. I mean, we've got a huge amount of work to do in the financial services space to improve the way that we do things. A lot of our infrastructure still operates the way that it has for 100 years. So it's a really great time to be in this space.
Yeah, and it's also a really good time to be speaking with you, which is, say, in the morning, because what you're saying about luminaries, intelligent people, great people to work with during the daytime is not always what I hear at nighttime. So it's good to know positive things can come out of your mouth as well. So the question of the day, and I think most people would wonder this when they meet you, is how on earth did you end up in payments?
So that's a really good question. So yeah, to give people context, my first job out of school was actually with the Australian Army. So running around the bush and carrying heavy things up and down hills was primarily what I was paid to do. And following that, I actually got medically discharged from the Army. So I was left at a loss with what to do with my life. All the things that I thought I was going to be doing through my 20s, I had to rethink. And I ended up working in banking. And for starters, I kind of worked in the technology space. I'd qualified as a systems engineer, and I worked in a dealing room supporting everything from phone systems to trading systems. Back in those days, it was quite common for physical handsets to get broken at frustrating times in a dealing room.
We've all seen the film.
Yeah. So a lot of what I was doing was picking up exploded pieces of plastic from the floor and handing out new handsets. But actually, it was during the financial crisis that actually I ended up pivoting my career. I was working in carbon trading and hoping to sort of make something of that. And at the time in Australia, we sort of set on a fixed price of carbon, which sort of changed some of the strategies around carbon trading. And I ended up having to find something else to do. So I went to started working with ANZ on a payments project. And it was a really interesting time to join. This is about early 2009 and through into 2010. And I had to become a payments expert, in inverted commas, very quickly. I had to suddenly develop an understanding of the space. What was interesting at the time is a lot of the people that you see on stage now, people like David Birch or Brett King or Liz Oakes, were writing a lot of articles around payments, how they were evolving. PayPal, which you might be familiar with, was growing rapidly at that time. And there was really, over my first 2 years in payments, there was lots of stuff going on. And so, yeah, I kind of stumbled into it, to be honest. And but I have to say it's been such an exciting journey looking at all of this synthesis of technology and money that has brought us into this space that we're all working in at the moment.
Fair enough. I think by accident is usually the answer for most
answer.
people I come along with. Very good. You win the by accident bingo card, which we've handed out before this session. So given that you've been in the space for 11 years now at least, right? Are you a little surprised to see fintech be as trendy today as it is? Is it trendy or is it just hitting its stride?
I certainly feel like it's trendy. What actually surprises me is the amount of focus the mainstream media puts on fintech. I really never thought that, I qualified as a systems engineer. I worked in networks. It's kind of plumbing, right? When the plumbing works, no one cares, and when it's broken, it's all your fault. And that's sort of how I always viewed payments. It's like, if the payment works, everyone's like, okay, great, let's get on with life, and no one really cares about it. And as soon as it stops working, well then, there's lots of blame going around. But what's really interesting is the depth of thought that's gone into what using payment services means for consumers and for businesses, and the way that has been addressed, examined and pulled apart has thrust fintech into the mainstream media, and that's the thing that's kind of surprised me, that you see in mainstream media things like central bank digital currencies being discussed. You see what's happening with the card networks. You see these really rapidly growing and really impressive firms of very intelligent teams really being celebrated not only in niche media but in mainstream media. I mean, GT News and what else? I mean, Twitter was starting it to be interested in payments back in 2009. But it was really so far to come to see this as now. And you look at the event that we're attending at the moment, a global event with really, really impressive headline speakers, all focused on fintech. Never thought. So yes, it's kind of cool. And it's, it's certainly a fun space to be in. And I didn't at the time. For me, it was just homework. I was like, oh God, I've got to learn this stuff so I don't look like an idiot. I managed to learn it. I still managed to look like an idiot though, so that's good.
It's the best of both worlds, really. When you think about solved problems versus unsolved problems, what's an unsolved problem that you think this industry is really yet to get its hands around that's within the space?
So that's a big question. There's a lot. One of the ones I like to talk about, because I think there's a really important behavioural element in it, is the elimination of checks. And the reason, and I don't think that's a particularly important social problem, and I don't think it's particularly, a huge restraint on the industry.
For people that are a little younger in the audience, can you explain what a check is?
Yeah, it's an IOU typically with a bank logo on it. So, but we've been talking about eliminating checks for eons, and the reality is the simple trust exchange of saying I'm going to pay you later by giving you this piece of paper has not yet been able to be replaced by digital payments. And to me, it's not the replacement of the physical check that's so interesting. It's like, what is it about me saying, hey, Joel, here's a piece of paper, which is my promise that I'm going to pay you in a bit. When you go and give this to your bank or put it in your store of value, you're going to get money from me. And you trust me to do that, and you give me a service on the back of that. And that trust conversation has always fascinated me since I first started, since I had to come to grips with what happened to a check after I put a signature on it. I think that it's not that that's such an important problem. It's just that it's a really good barometer of where we are on the journey. When we can replace the trust environment of that to allow that value exchange to happen and to remove friction, which is essentially what checks did when they were first invented, I feel that's a really good way to say, okay, we've done something big. When that's no longer required anywhere, then that's a really interesting watermark to say, okay, that's.
Do you think we're doing a good job of creating digital trust, or are we doing a good job of creating the appearance of trustworthiness, which then creates other problems down the line?
I was actually thinking of putting together a T-shirt for this conference that says "Trust under construction," and I kind of feel like that's where we are, and we're testing so many different things. If to take a sidestep, if you look at what's happening in DeFi, and the different business models we're trying to find ways to replicate that in-person trust that happens over time in a very real-time and transactional space, and that's hard. So do I think we're doing? I think we're doing a great job, to be honest. But I think that doesn't mean that there's not more wood to chop, or not a lot more work to do. And what we're all finding is that it's not constrained to this little paymentsy space here. Like it's intrinsic in human behaviour. It's in the way that we interact with each other. It's in how we share information, and how that information can be influenced. All of those things play into that building of trust. But yeah, I think we're doing a really good job. I think that we're in the traditional payment space, we're looking at how do we layer trust on top of a really sort of fragmented system, and some of the work you talked about that Rapyd's doing is looking at that problem. But also we're then experimenting with rewriting the underlying operating system of how financial services works in terms of programmable currencies and decentralized currencies. So I think we are all doing the work to get us to that point, but we're not going to run out of things to do for a little while.
All right, so you've touched a couple times now on distributed finance, cryptocurrencies in various ways, et cetera. I guess two-part question. One, do you actually see change having been made today, right? Has the economy changed in any way because of the growth of cryptocurrency? The first part of my question.
Okay. I think it's hard to see. So if you look at the total market cap of crypto at the moment, it would be difficult to say that if you look at market cap as a proxy for gravity, that it had sort of significantly shifted the world economies. Where I think it's had an interesting impact is this. I get to talk about this with some experts a bit later on in the week, but we are seeing a huge amount of interest from central banks, from established institutions, and from people trying to solve real-world problems in trade, focused on looking at the technologies and tools of cryptocurrency and decentralized finance. So let's, from an investment perspective, the behavior of, decentralized currencies is very different to other assets. And so from a hedging perspective, it provides a natural, place for people to want to play. But I think more importantly, there's a couple of elements. So programmability, the idea of a shared ledger, it doesn't have to be a blockchain necessarily, but the idea of a shared ledger and being able to have things happen across multiple operators in a network to validate that a thing is true. These two concepts, I think, are really forcing people to rethink the way that we're building tools for financial services. I think we're a little way away before that has an impact that permeates, everything that we do. But I think we're definitely past the tipping point of this being a flash in the pan that doesn't really ever affect anything.
What is a use case that's in use today that you think is impactful or will be impactful in the next 6 months? So, there's a couple that I could go to. A use case of Bitcoin as an investment is definitely something that is impactful now and will likely continue to be. I could be wrong, but I think it's likely. What's interesting is stablecoins or fiat tokens, and how those that are in use today, even if they're being used for the settlement of trading on crypto or the movement of crypto assets into fiat currency, that is a practical use case that can be expanded much beyond where it is today. And it's, we're certainly seeing that scale well. Some are doing it better than others, but it is having a real impact. And then again, even if you look at the impact of not a use case itself that's necessarily going to have continuity, the impact of both the Central Bank of China and of Facebook focusing in this space has really driven a very broad conversation across regulators, and we can't get away from that. Right. Natural allies as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I think, from my perspective, you touched CBDC, you said, basically stable coins, digital fiat currency, et cetera. Just the idea of a primarily self-clearing mechanism for trade to happen instantaneously, 24/7, and a currency that can then be exchanged with 24/7 FX capability into the currency you actually care about. That's transformational, right?
Yeah.
Is that, however, necessarily what most of the industry is today? Maybe not. So if you play that out to 3 years from now, right, what's the seed that you think is going to be the most impactful of a use case where, wow, that really mattered?
So I'll just grab my crystal ball and have a quick gaze. No, but thinking on a 3-year horizon, I do think that we will have programmable fiat tokens that will be actually in use in production, supporting trade activity, and it's simple mechanisms. So if you look at a fiat token in its simplest form, we talked about checks before, right? And it's not dissimilar, right? It's an IOU. Someone is a bearer, so they're holding that instrument, that negotiable instrument. They're able to exchange that for value, and that at the very simple level, it's a contract, right? So, Joel, I agree to pay you this amount of money over this, at this period of time, or when you present that certificate back to me. That use case is foundational in the way we build lots of different financial products, right? It's not, we sometimes we get excited about the fact that, there's all these complex financial products and everything's, really difficult, and there's no way we'll ever get to do that in this context or that context. But if you can actually bring most financial products down to a, simplistic series of debits and credits that are separated by time and then wrapped up in rights and obligations. It's a long sentence to say something simple, but and if you look at a basic fiat token, to me it's a foundational ingredient on which lots of things can be built.
Totally fair. Yeah, you remind me. I met a guy at a bar in Belize 20 years ago. He had a partner with let's just say a government official in Belize, and they would sell bearer bonds, and you'd fly down there in your plane. He'd build a shadow company for you. You'd stick your arm out the window, sign these bearer bonds, and wander off. And that was their financial innovation at the time, was how do you build a untraceable company in Belize? I met him at a bar, not a business context, but it was like, all right, let's put my wallet in my pocket and back slowly away from this.
Do the Homer
discussion.
Simpson into the head.
Yeah, exactly. So going to the community side, well, actually, let me pick a different angle. So given you started off after the Army and you got into the securities world and spent time in that part of the world, what is it about that world that you think is a positive that people should know in terms of how they approach growing companies today? Like what? Because that's not something people know a lot about necessarily unless they've actually been in that world themselves.
Sure. So I will qualify these statements with the fact that I'm quite rusty because it was a little while ago, but actually, it's, in my view, again, it's simple. The FX derivatives and managing FX risk is going to be with us for a considerable amount of time. And I actually think, to me, that is one of the risks that many companies that I speak to or that I've seen overlook. And currency fluctuation can have a massive impact, a very disproportionate impact on a business that's trying to grow. So, I guess I definitely wouldn't underestimate the importance of that. But as important is looking at instruments like repos and how that ties into the economy and the way that money works. What is different between now and when I was first learning this, which is back in 2000, is that the availability of information for free on the internet to teach everyone how this stuff works is insane. And if there's anything that you want to know about how money works today, it is available to do that. And whether it's through events like this or whether it's through your own research, I would definitely spend the time to understand that, because what capital markets does is it packages up all of the things in the real economy and then acts as an amplifier around attracting investment or mitigating risk or doing whatever it's supposed to do. I'm not going to the extremes of its goodness or the extremes of its badness, because like anything, it can be, positively impactful or negatively impactful. But yeah, I definitely think that, number one, make sure you understand how FX impacts your business, and number two, have a look at how the capital markets can impact what you're doing.
Fair enough. Interesting. The When you think about companies that are then capitalizing on packaging risk or helping defray risk, are there companies that you're inspired by that you think are doing something innovative in this space to help make those mitigations easier to do?
So to be honest, I'm probably not best placed to answer that question. Again, right now, what I'm looking at is not in that space. What I think is interesting. In 2000, about the last time I was working in this space was 2008, 2009. And obviously the big thing happening in capital markets at that time was a lack of transparency and clarity from the underlying asset all the way through to the ultimate investor. I think we have learnt from that, and you mentioned buy now, pay later, and factoring in our chat earlier. I think I think companies that do that particular thing well and provide access to real underlying trade flow risk, or the opportunity to provide liquidity into that to investors, and do that with clarity and transparency, will be the ones that show how this can make a big difference.
All right. Interesting. So a little bit less serious.
Yep.
If you couldn't call it Fintech, what would you call it?
That is a good question. It's so embedded in my brain. I think we'd have to take. I think it would be more interesting to consider what we do, like what it does. So, something along the lines of the money pipes, right? It's about how do you. So much of what we do today is kind of hanging out in the open. It's like all our pipes are bolted to the outside of the wall. It'd be nice to just be able to put them behind the wall and make it all neat and tidy.
Right. That's totally valid. I often teach people or talk to people about, what Apple did in 2002 or so when they first came out with the iPod.
Yep.
And how much complexity they pushed down that previously people had been, to the degree they were dealing with digital music, had to deal with it, right? Whether it's encryption, codecs, distribution issues, obviously player issues,
physical hardware.
Lots of physical hardware, lots of USB drives perhaps, but all that complexity got pushed down, and because the complexity got pushed down, the ecosystem could actually grow, counterintuitively. People thought the job was doing this, turns out the job was actually somewhere else entirely.
Exactly.
So let's talk about community. How have you seen the Money Pipes community evolve in the last couple of years in Asia?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. One of the ways I like to characterize it is this: when I first started working in payments in particular, but actually in banking, access to diverse thought was hard. So organisations, you would have lots of people that were isolated in different parts of different organisations doing really interesting stuff, but everybody felt like that they were a bit of an island or a bit disconnected. And as we've created more of a community around fintech or money pipes, that connectivity between different people who are constantly questioning, is this the best way we can do this? Can we do this a bit better? That seems a bit painful, or these people are suffering because this thing works in a way that doesn't help. Connecting those people has been really, really powerful. And I think what I've seen, so I first came to Asia in 2013, and what I think is great about the community, certainly across this region, but I think it's true globally, and more so where we're more connected, is that, you mentioned in the Varun session with the town centre, I can't remember the word, and I'm so sorry, but the town centre that he created for people to get their questions answered. I think the community is becoming denser in terms of more and more people collaborating. And I think one of the characteristics of the community is this, there's not much of a tall poppy syndrome here. Most people don't seem to be interested in other people failing. Like, I've seen you work really collaboratively with your competitors and exchange complex ideas. And I think we want these, the companies in this space to succeed, the people in this space to succeed. So I found it to be a very uplifting community, and that's gotten stronger and stronger, probably as my network has grown, but also as the Singapore and the region have become much more of a hub for this kind of innovation. And the last point I'd make is I think, we talk about, there's a lot of nationalism, going on in the world at the moment, and people, closing down and being very protectionist. I actually feel in general this community is going in the opposite direction. I feel more connected into China and the US and, Indonesia and Vietnam and all of these different countries that don't always necessarily, get on so well on a world stage. Mm-hmm. But the people that are within those countries doing interesting things are connected and are, challenging each other and sharing ideas. And I think that's what's powerful about it.
And in what forums do you see those ideas get shared?
Heaps. So if we look at this is a really good example, Singapore Fintech Festival. Obviously, need to give that a plug, but it's through copious WhatsApp or WeChat groups. It's through meetups. It's through sharing articles. Like the access to media. You look at Medium as a publishing example. The way that content or people can put ideas out and have them challenged. Is really powerful, and and Twitter and social media have played their part. But yeah, I think I've listed every possible way that we could do that, but that's how it's happening. Even if it's in a over a drink in a bar or in any other kind of incidental human interaction within the community, we challenge each other, have a bit of a laugh, and I think that's probably the one thing I'd like to see more of is us be a bit more lighthearted about it. Like. It's what we do is amazing. We're really trying to help the world, but it's also fun, and it's funny. We get carried away with buzzwords. We get carried away with how cool we are. We get carried away with the technology, and so that humor in the community is awesome.
So I would be remiss not to ask you. Your shirt says Fuardes. What does that mean?
It's called Fintech and Other F Words, and that's what it's about. But it's just really a community of people that. A bit lighthearted about what we do. I think, it's always important to poke fun in a lighthearted and constructive way. John Cleese does a really good spiel on this around political correctness, and he talks about poking fun in a way that's mean and poking fun in a way that's kind. And I think we should be poking fun at fintech as a whole concept, as a construct, as white Anglo-Saxon men with beards and glasses in jeans and t-shirts, all of those funny memes that happen around fintech, and just be able to take ourselves not so seriously.
Very good. And what are you doing about it yourself? You've got the shirts, you've got the beer in the bar. What else do we need to do as a community to inject a little more of that lighthearted fun, particularly in a not very lighthearted time?
I think so. Two things: curiosity, right? So. You find the fun when you're curious about something, when you go a little deeper. If you take all of the buzzwords at face value, if you look at everything and you drink all of the Kool-Aid, it can very quickly become unfun. But as humans, we always find humour, even in the darkest of circumstances. And as a ex-soldier, I'm very familiar with some pretty dark humour. But I think the idea is that. We should care about what each other's doing and listen very carefully to what each of the members of the community are doing. Just be curious. Oh, why are you doing it that way? What are you doing? Oh, you've written a book. Tell me more about your book. What are you addressing? And celebrating the work that people are putting in. I think, and that sounds all very heavy. I don't think it is. I think it's fun.
Sure,
it's amusing.
Yeah, and I think this network, this community is about people. Right? And if you don't engage with the people, then in reality, you're not getting the most out of it that you possibly can.
Completely agree.
Sounds good. So with 1 minute to go, who is one person or company that inspires you in this community?
Okay, I'm gonna take a very obscure one. So I'm going to talk about a company called Matrix Sport, but specifically. Rachel Lynn, who works in that company, we think of, and I'm sorry for going back to crypto, but we think of crypto as the Wild West. We think of, it not having a risk element to that. I'm inspired by this person because she's worked across so many different parts of the industry, and has really been able to capture the idea of proper, well-disciplined risk management in a very, high risk, high volatility environment. And I think we need more of that. We need this kind of responsible, caring approach to how we're building financial services. And I find, Rachel certainly challenges me to do that.
Awesome. Sounds good. René, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the week. It's been great having you in the office. And everybody else, we'll see you tomorrow morning at this time in Boat Key.